Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well, and in today's video, for the first time, I will be doing a book review. And the book I will be reviewing is a Nancy Drew book, and this is from the Nancy Drew Diaries series, and oh my goodness, I love this series! And the book I will be reviewing today is called The Clue at Black Creek Farm. And I actually listened to an audiobook of this a little while back, maybe like a week or two ago, and I have quite a few opinions on this book. So without further ado, let's get into this book review. Okay, so to start off with, Nancy and her two friends, George and Bess, are invited to this banquet at this farm that grows their produce organically instead of, the regular way of farming. You know how farmers grow their fruits and vegetables and put it on a truck and ship it to the stores and that sort of thing. They don't do all that. So they're invited to this banquet, and okay, I'm just gonna say that the message of the story is about how good organic farming is, but it's so weird because it's even mentioned a couple times that scientists haven't necessarily proven that organic farming is better than regular farming. And honestly, I was curious about this, and I looked it up myself because I thought maybe the author of this just didn't have a lot of information, didn't find a lot of information on this topic back when they wrote this. So I'm like, maybe this story kind of has a point. I was kind of curious to see what I could find myself, and what I found, apparently there are pros and cons to both organic farming and the regular kind of farming. So there do seem to be pros and cons to that, but I read it just, I guess, really depends on what the farmers, I guess, want to do or something, but yeah. But even in the book, like I said, it's mentioned a few times that organic farming hasn't necessarily been proven to be better. And one of the characters that is really for organic farming even says, yeah, that's true, but it's just the way they bring out this message, it's just so flat, I guess is the word to call it. But I will just say that the message in this story is weak. It is very weak, because they're trying to say how good organic farming is, but again, it's even said in the book a few times that it's not necessarily better. And when I looked it up, I kind of got the same, the same thing. So, yeah, I'm like, the message is trying to say it's better, but yet even in the book they're saying it's not necessarily better. It's like, really? I'm sorry. This book is pretty good, but I have just never seen a more weaker message in a book. I mean, I just cannot get over how weak the message is. Even at the end of the story, I know Bess asked Nancy at the end of the story what she think of organic farming or something like that. And from what I remember, Nancy didn't even give her a straight answer, really. Just like the whole message of the story isn't a straight answer necessarily. So it's like, really? I just find the message of this story to be super weak. I'm just going to say that right off. The message is weak. But even though the message is weak, there are some other good things about this story. But I will say, I'm not happy with the way it ends, but I'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, we meet the guy, Sam, and his wife, Abby, who run the farm. And now something interesting I found about this book is that the guy, Sam, he used to be a really big-time lawyer, but he wasn't happy with his job, so he sold his law practice and bought a farm. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that sounds exactly like an old-timey TV show that I've seen, because I actually like a few of those old TV shows that came out in like the 1960s. And there's actually an old TV show in the 1960s called Green Acres that has that exact same plot. A lawyer isn't happy with his career in his life, so he sells his law practice, moves to a farm, and yeah. So I'm like, oh my goodness, I wonder if this was like referencing that. Because I'm like, that is so weird how much alike that is. That is just bizarre. I'm telling you, that had to be a reference. At least I think it is. If not, that is a big coincidence. But anyway, so yeah, there's this one part in the book where Sam is like explaining about organic farming, and he does mention, I think this was when he was still a lawyer, that he handled a case about some lady died or almost died from I think it was salmonella, or did I pronounce that right? Salmonella? I hope I pronounced that right. But anyway, yeah. So, yeah. The first part of the book just kind of, isn't the best. And again, it starts off with a weak message. In fact, the message in general is just weak. I don't know why the author went with such a weak message. But anyway. So, just as the banquet is about to begin and everyone's about to eat, Sam's daughter-in-law, his son Jack's wife, Julie, she gets sick from food poisoning, because apparently the crops, or the vegetables, I should say, and, everything had been contaminated. And she's sick, and on top of that, she's pregnant, and she's 8 months along, so she's just got 1 month ahead. She's just 1 month away. And Sam is convinced that his crops are safe, but yet apparently he doesn't have 100% faith in them, because they actually only eat store-bought produce once this thing with Julie happens. But just to be safe, they don't let anyone eat the fruits or vegetables or, anything that they were offering at the banquet. And then, if I remember, I think it was George. She was the one that, either her or Bess, I honestly forget which one, but I think it was George, suggested to Sam that Nancy could solve the case because she had solved other cases before. And seeing how hopeful they were in her, Nancy agrees. And I think it's the next day, if I remember right, she comes to the farm, and Sam's wife, Abby, had actually already called her and told her that something had happened. And once they get to the house and they are out with Sam in his fields, they see what happened, which is that their greenhouse was completely destroyed, and there was a message written in soil in the greenhouse saying kill the farm. So someone is definitely trying to sabotage the farm, because originally, before Nancy started to investigate, she was thinking that maybe there was just just a simple accident. Maybe someone hadn't washed their hands or something, and the fruits or vegetables got contaminated that way, and just a little slip up. But apparently now Nancy knows for sure that it was not a slip up. Someone is definitely trying to ruin this farm. And now what's weird, another thing that I really find weird about this book is that this guy, Bob, shows up, and he's literally only in this one scene, and he's a helper. He helps from time to time, or I think he just helps from time to time, if I remember right. And apparently Sam has done a lot for this guy, and actually Nancy suspects him. And I gotta say, the scene he's in, it kind of hints that maybe he's the one. But it's so weird because he's literally never seen again in the story. He's literally only in this one scene. He's mentioned, of course, but he's never actually, in any other scenes. So his role in this story is really useless. But Nancy does consider him to be a suspect, but still, since he's only in this one scene, him even being in this story at all is just, I don't think him being in this story was necessary, really. I guess, the author just figured to put him in here just to give, some mystery and have Nancy have some more suspects. I guess that was his only purpose. But that just still seems pretty pointless. At least I think his role in the story was just pointless, other than to, again, give Nancy another suspect and just kind of, yeah. But still, I think him being in the story was still not necessary at all. But Nancy does have another suspect, which is this girl that also helps out with the farm, and her family has a much bigger farm, and they do, regular farming, unlike Sam and his wife do. And so Nancy suspects this girl of maybe being the one who's trying to stop this farm. Or shut it down, I should say. And so there's this one part which is pretty messed up, if you ask me. Once Nancy goes to this other farm and is going to question this girl, she actually asked the girl if she could use her phone because she needs to call her dad, and the girl lets her use her phone, and Nancy walks away to use the girl's phone, and she snoops on the girl's phone. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Nowadays, you can't do that nowadays. I mean, with it being so easy with people putting viruses and trackers on your phone, I'm like, are you kidding me? I would never do that. Especially someone I hardly even knew. In fact, I think this is her first official time meeting Nancy. So I'm like, girl, you just gave your phone to someone you just met? And she never finds out that Nancy snooped on her phone, but still. I'm like, really? Really, Nancy? Really, girl? Oh my goodness, that was crazy. But anyway, Nancy doesn't find out anything that makes her suspicious that this girl could be the culprit. It's actually kind of funny that she never suspected anyone else on this rival farm to be the culprit, but since this farm does seem to be better, now that I think about it, I don't see why they would want to put an end to it, now that I think about it. And yeah, so I guess that's why the author figured, don't introduce any other characters from this rival farm, because they're not the ones doing this, plus why would they? So that actually does kind of make sense. But anyway, so then once Nancy knows it's not this girl, later on, her and Bess, and then eventually George joins them to camp outside the farm and keep an eye on things. And when it's really early in the morning, the sun is just starting to come up, but it's not all the way up yet. It's just at that point in the morning when the sky is starting to get a little light. Nancy hears something going on with the chickens, and she goes to check it out, and someone had actually killed a couple of the chickens, and she sees someone dressed in a black hoodie and has a knife, and this person runs after Nancy and even shoots at her. And she gets back in the house, and she then remembers George and Bess, and Abby gets up Sam, and he goes to get George and Bess, and actually at this point of the story, Nancy is suspecting the guy's son, Jack, to be the culprit, and she's trying to find his black hoodie, because she figured that black hoodie belonged to him and that was him who had went after her. So she says that she has to go to the bathroom, and she finds him in his wife's room, and she starts snooping on his laptop and even for some of his messages to herself. And his wife actually catches her, and I kind of forget all of what happens in that scene, but the lady doesn't seem to suspect Nancy, but it's actually interesting because the woman is about to take a shower, so once she opens up the bathroom door, that's when Nancy sees the black hoodie. So she's like, it's definitely him. Because she actually still suspected Bob, but again, Bob is never seen again. So yeah, suspecting him was pointless. Him even being in the story, I honestly think was pointless. But anyway. So then she reads the messages that apparently Jack supposedly was sending to someone else, and it sounded like he was, so willing to stop the farm to where, or, he wanted to stop the farm so badly that he was willing to hurt, maybe even kill his own father. When I heard that, because I listened to this, an audiobook of this, I'm like, man, that boy's crazy if he's willing to go that far. But actually, he wasn't the culprit, because Nancy actually bugs a table at this coffee shop that George works at, because supposedly Jack and whoever this other person was supposed to meet there. But it doesn't turn out to be Jack. It ends up being his pregnant wife, Julie, and that girl, her name was Holly, that invited George, Bess, and Nancy to the banquet in the first place. So I'm like, wait a minute, back up, hold on. You mean to tell me that a pregnant woman that's 8 months along went after a teenager that's, ran after a teenager that's in good shape? And I think there's even a part in the story where Nancy said that who was chasing her was gaining fast. And I'm like, what? How is a pregnant woman that's 8 months along able to run fast? How is she able to run at all? I'm like, okay, I just have a hard time believing that, and I still have a hard time believing that. And with her wearing a hoodie, I get it was a black hoodie and it was still dark out, but how did Nancy not notice that her stomach was big? And I'm like, how was she even able to run after Nancy, and why did she even run after her in the first place? How was she even able to? Either I'm missing something, or this story just makes no sense, or at least in that part. But anyway, she finds out it's Julie, which I was really unhappy to find out that it was Julie. Anyway, so Julie then kidnaps both Nancy and George and takes them out into the woods, and she's going to kill them with that same knife that she killed the chickens with. But I'm really confused, because if Nancy and George were in the woods with her and she's pregnant, why couldn't they just get away? Because if I'm not mistaken, she didn't even tie them up. So I'm like, wait a minute. If she didn't tie them up, why couldn't they just get away? Because I wouldn't think that a woman that's 8 months pregnant should be able to really run. Because Nancy and George are, I'm sure, very healthy teenagers and could probably get away from her very quickly. And her accomplice, Holly, was starting to reconsider this because she didn't want things to go this far. But I'm like, I don't get this. This just does not make sense. Why couldn't they just get away from her? Were they seriously just going to stand there and let her put an end to them? I'm like, really? They could take her, probably, or get away from her at least. I'm like, really? But anyway, before, or just as she was kidnapping them, Nancy was able to get attention, of a police officer, and they arrest both Julie and Holly, and yeah. And then at the end of the story, it's revealed that Julie had actually had a baby boy, and that the dad was raising it, and that he actually divorced Julie, which, oh my goodness, I just really don't like this ending. I don't like the fact that it was Julie that was the culprit, and I just don't like how it ended. And the reason she even did that in the first place was something like how she lost her job and how Sam used the inheritance that was supposed to go to her and Jack to build the farm, and yeah. So, yeah, I can imagine the rest of her life, or at least however long she'd be in jail for, was not very pretty, I'm sure. But they do mention that that Jack did want the boy to have something to do with his mom, but I'm like, okay, sure, I may not know anything about law, but if she's in jail, if one of the crimes that she's in jail for was attempted murder, and Nancy and George are minors, because they do mention that they're teenagers, wouldn't she not be able to be allowed to be around minors, like kids, or at least not without supervision? I don't know. I don't know nothing about law, so I don't know how that would work, but I'm like, what? I'm clearly not a law expert, but just from where I stand, that just was confusing to me. But anyway, so yeah, this is a good story. I think I would listen to it again, but again, I think that the message is weak, and I don't like how it ends. I don't like who the crook ended up being, and yeah, I just don't like the ending. There's some things about this book I personally just am not nuts about.